This is The Naked Life with Roxanne Noor. Hello, dears. Today I'm interviewing my old boss and my good friend, Jonathan Day Potter. Jonathan's the founder of Behold Retreats, a psychedelic and plant medicine retreat company, helping leaders raise consciousness through ayahuasca, psilocybin, and 5-MeO-DMT. Behold Retreats has been recognized for their work by CBS, NBC, Mary Claire, The Telegraph, and many other media outlets. Through Jonathan's own journey with the plants and creating a successful multi-million-dollar company in this healing space, he has a plethora of first-hand experience in psychedelic exploration. Not only has he seen hundreds of people have the ability to heal, but he's seen people be able to come in direct contact with the mystery of life, explore their interiors, and ultimately just raise consciousness for the collective. Today we're going to be speaking about our own personal journeys and creating a sense of clarity around what these medicines actually feel like, how we can integrate the experiences into the fabric of our daily lives, and ultimately how to let life be our sadhana, be our spiritual guidance, and to take the lessons and to work with them, how the microcosm is really the macrocosm. So let's get started. So today I wanted to talk about the psychedelic journey because it feels like right now we're in a psychedelic renaissance where there's a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon wanting to get into it because of people like Joe Rogan. Everyone's like, wow, this is amazing, let's do it. And back during the 70s, there was just a huge pause in research, in developing studies. And now there seems like more than ever, a lot of research, a lot of information, but then also a lot of misinformation. And I think what gives people fear is not having real understanding. And today, I think what we can do is share our firsthand experience, our stories, the fact that you are the founder of a huge retreat center, and you've seen many people go on this journey, whether it's with psilocybin or bufo or ayahuasca. You have this field research, like firsthand experience of doing it yourself, of seeing many clientele get into it. I think what we can start with that would be the most interesting is 5-MeO-DMT, because it seems like something that's not so well researched yet compared to something like psilocybin or ayahuasca.
Yeah.
So how would you describe, so let's start with what 5-MeO-DMT is.
Yeah. So 5-MeO-DMT, also known as bufo or the God molecule, is quite easily the most powerful psychedelic we have. Generally recognized to be 4 to 6 times more powerful even than ayahuasca. Generally, the experience is relatively short. The peak of the experience is something like 20 to 30 minutes. And so that allows the ceremonies themselves to be more individualized, which I think is really lovely. And it's very possible through, shall we say, when you have a breakthrough experience, that you actually move into what is known as a non-dual state. So what that means is that the outside world and the inside world actually become one. And that's a really beautiful, very powerful experience, life-changing experience for many people who experience that. And we can enter this place of kind of knowing that everything is okay and kind of reaching oneness with source, with God, with creation, with the universe, whatever language or label we might prefer to use. So certainly it's growing in popularity. There's been a number of kind of A-list celebrities that have really raved about their experiences and the positive impact that it has had on perhaps their anxiety or their depression or their further spiritual development. And you're quite right, there is no scientific research as far as I know with 5-MeO-DMT. There has been what is known as kind of more anecdotal research that has been led by academic institutions, but it's not a designed clinical trial. It's more of just receiving people's feedback on individual experiences that have happened, more out in the wild, whether that's underground or just doing it yourself, which, these are not things that I would necessarily recommend, obviously, recognizing my bias given the nature of the work that we do, or within a retreat setting or working with a private healer.
Yeah. And I think what's also really interesting about 5-MeO-DMT is a lot of other substances are really about narrative arc, personal story. Even with ayahuasca, with psilocybin, there's this feeling of being really taken on a journey that can sort of be encompassed in words. And 5-MeO-DMT is so about the universal. And I think that's also why it could be really difficult to study, is the fact that so much information is being given at such a short amount of time. And that's why I think actually doing multiple ceremonies in a row makes sense.
Yeah.
Being able to be with someone who can help you to integrate all the information and bring it back down to earth is so important.
Yeah.
And also the fact that 5-MeO-DMT doesn't really have a strong lineage in the way that something like ayahuasca does. So yeah, it's from the Bufo alvarius toad, the Sonoran Desert toad, and even the whereabouts about how it was founded. There's also a weird amount of misinformation too, and so all of it is up to subjective experience and the fact that it really is the pinnacle of psychedelics. Yeah, it's so strong.
Yeah.
There's been times when I've been in ceremony, a friend will go before me and I'll hold space and watch, and the person will be having an exorcism, like full out thrashing, like bodily convulsions. But then when you talk to the person afterwards, it was like the best experience of their life. And you see that even if it's painful, in so many ways, what we need in order not only to heal, but to explore the concept of self is to really confront the pain and confront it in a way that you're held. And that's the beauty of having, Timothy Leary talks about set and setting, having like a really nurturing space, having someone who is well equipped. So when processes come up, the space is being held in a way that people feel safe.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. And, I think I'd like to kind of respond to that by starting with, certainly given the power of this medicine, it's not for everyone. I think people in general, meditators or people with past psychedelic experiences are much more well equipped to handle an experience of this intensity. Certainly there's a number of stories out there of people trying to jump straight into an experience of this intensity and that really not being in their highest interests. And so, as ever, I always encourage people to really do their own research and trust their intuition with respect to whether or not they are ready for an experience of this depth. And yeah, like you said, it can represent such a radical shift in understanding of how we experience reality, and moving into what is known as a non-dual experience, where there is no more subject object or right or wrong. There's just one, is a profound change to the lens through which we experience reality. And so, as you say, to have guidance, to have support, to have the container, other people who have been through such an experience to help you bring it down and in, so that it can be an experience which is increasingly lived versus just an experience that was had at a point in time, for example, I think is so important. And I think, as you say, it actually, the absence of the lineage to some degree actually has some benefits associated with it as well. A lot of these medicines, as we know, come from indigenous traditions of different varieties, hundreds of traditions for ayahuasca, probably equally many for psilocybin. 5-MeO doesn't have quite the same, shall we say, indigenous or shamanic background. And so in that respect, it's not so much of an earth medicine as I describe it, but more of an ether medicine. And that seems to appeal in some ways to a broader audience. So for example, we receive a lot more people from Saudi Arabia or from Dubai that are much more interested in 5-MeO-DMT, but don't resonate so much with an indigenous shamanic experience in, say, Costa Rica or Mexico with ayahuasca or psilocybin. So that I find to be quite interesting as well.
And it also sort of makes sense because with even Westerners, for example, growing up in America, there's going to be a gap between you and that culture. There would probably be a lack of understanding.
Yeah.
And especially if someone's guiding you, they don't even speak the same language. And yeah, a lot of it is beautiful. The chanting is beautiful. There's many aspects that are beautiful, but it's what you want to get out of it. Some people maybe want this connection really deeply with the land, with the culture. And for other people, maybe it's just internal journey and it has actually nothing to do with that. And so for the mind that is very modernized, this could be a gap that's difficult. So it makes sense what you were saying with people like that preferring 5-MeO-DMT. And the fact that so much of not even just mental illness, but suffering in general is from the wound of separation, is from the fact that we forget that we are a part of everything. And even saying it out loud, it always sounds like a woo-woo hippie statement, like we are one. But, and you read it and you know it on a cognitive level, but there's such a difference between, reading it in the Tao Te Ching or Bhagavad Gita or whatever it is, and then actually having the visceral experience that you are everything. And that being very difficult to talk about because it's something that's so beyond our cognition. And even when I think about my own experiences with 5-MeO-DMT, I had multiple ones where I did want it to be about the personhood and healing. And I remember I was having like back to back for months rape nightmares. Consistently. And I was like, there is something deep in my subconscious, because in conscious reality, I'm hitchhiking the world alone. I'm traveling all alone. I'm like independent woman. But then in the astral realm, I feel like there's a lot of tension with men. And this was something that I wanted to bring awareness to. And it was my intention for ceremony to go into this darkness and to face it. And then in the ceremony, it was the exact opposite. It was all about losing the personhood, losing the story, seeing that I'm so much more than just what's happened to me in life. And in ceremony, I just could not stop laughing. It was 30 minutes of just like hysterical laughter when, the person before me was having exorcism and freak out. And then it shows, how each experience is so different. And intention is really important, but a lot of the time what you get is what you need. Like I thought, I really need to heal from this. And in a way I did, because the nightmare stopped.
Right.
Yeah. And all it took was this lack of seriousness or this heaviness. And seeing that so much of the time we solidify around the worst thing in life that happened to us.
It's true.
Yeah. And this is also the beauty of so many psychedelics, is breaking these patterns of thought, breaking the automatic habits that we get into, our limiting beliefs, all these things. And you can do it without the story. You can do it without the psychoanalysis of 7 years and all these things. And you can just feel it. But I think really the job is, as you said, life afterwards. When something so huge happens to you, what is the way you bring it into everything?
Yeah. There's a quote that comes to mind from Alan Watts. He said, the only mistake that we make is that we take seriously what God made for fun. And, I think what you're pointing at is that it's so easy to get caught up in identity, who we have been, what happened to us, why it happened, how it should have been, what's coming for us, who we are, where we're going. And it's all just this kind of, shall we say, identity and egoic stuff that isn't really an accurate reflection of who and what we are. And so I think these medicines can show us a state of being where all of that societal programming, all of that trauma, all of that identification of past and future is, for a brief minute, which can feel pretty infinite actually, is gone. And so bringing us, or providing the window for us to move more securely into presence and into who and what we truly are, and deepening and maintaining a connection to the higher power. And so with that, I think there's so much that we need to let go of or be willing to let go of in order to get there. But certainly it's, for me at least, it's been the most exciting and beneficial thing that's happened to me and continues to be the case. It's, it's an ongoing journey for all of us.
Yeah, and really the way we're conditioned to really be in identity all the time and take everything so heavily and so seriously, and that's part of the problem sometimes. And I really love the research that John Hopkins has done, Griffiths in particular. Yeah. And I think the study that stood out the most to me is the biggest fear I think that all of us had, and we face this with the pandemic, is the fear of our own mortality, of death.
Yeah.
And basically he took 80 cancer patients, and it was something like 2/3 of them eliminated the fear of death. It went from being anxious to just feeling like actually comforting their families. And this is the thing of realizing that, of course, we came into this body to honor it, but we are more than our physical form. We are more than our job title. We are more than all the things that we were made to believe. And as humans, we are such meaning-making machines.
Yeah.
And I think what we see in society is this grabbing in the external world, thinking like, this will give me meaning, this will give me meaning, this will. And so much of psychedelics allow this spaciousness and this internal processing to see that the meaning isn't necessarily always sourced from outside or from, how long you live, but it's something so much more than that.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I think, what you point at there is just reflects the infinite wisdom that is inherent to life, right? I mean, isn't it amazing that 2/3 of the people who had this experience had exactly the experience that would be the most beneficial to them?
Yes.
It's not a chance, right? And I think, a lot of people still believe ultimately in chaos all around them. They experience life as inherently chaotic, and it's just not the case. There's always a higher order that's at work. And so when we're able to connect with ourselves more deeply, and use substances such as psilocybin or ayahuasca or 5-MeO to really amplify our sensitivity to our own consciousness, our own subconsciousness, and to explore that, wow, the things that can come from inside to help us discover, yet another layer of who and what we are, and activate more of our DNA and help us align to our greatest potential. There's just so many layers that are available through this work. Obviously, psychedelics help. It's not necessary, but they certainly can speed up the process.
Yeah, and this is what I felt also is the same experiences I've had while meditating. For Vipassana, for example, you're in silence, you wake up at 4 a.m, you're meditating at least 10 hours a day, and this thing of no distractions, you can get there without any of the substances. I've had DMT releases while meditating that have been also transformative. But what I've noticed actually is that when you are using psychedelic substances, the fact that it creates new neural pathways, afterwards, when you go back into meditation, it's easier to reach these places. And it's stronger. And so it's not like I do 5-MeO DMT and need to do it every month. No, it's the breath work that comes after. It's the meditation that comes after. It's the sound journeys. It's all the other things, but being able to tap back into that place because on a biological level, something has opened.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I think that's exactly it. That's, when people ask me, okay, so how do these medicines work? I describe it much in the same way that you have, which is that it shines a light down the path so that the direction that you're trying to move in, and so these states of being, which as far as I can tell are infinite in terms of the closeness to source. It seems to just continue to go and go and go. And so that provides, each of these experiences provides a light down the path so that we can begin to make those, daily baby steps to try to embody that and live that. And so that we can ultimately live from that place without any external requirements, such that almost all of life becomes the meditation rather than the requirement to go do a 10-day. And don't get me wrong, I'm glad you raised meditation, because I think it's, if people are doing psychedelics but not meditation, I think they're probably missing the whole point, because it's all about being able to embody these states of being without external support, as you said before.
Yeah, exactly. And I think another point that came up while you were speaking is we get into, especially in our culture right now, I think it's very much about healing, especially the community we live in, which is quite a spiritualized community on this little island in Thailand. And there's like this obsession almost with healing, but I think a lot of the really interesting work and the real work is for everyone actually, and it's a question of raising consciousness, and it's a question of what you said, going back to source. And maybe you're not depressed, maybe you're not addicted to a certain substance, maybe it's actually about recognizing your full potential and how truly important that is. So it's not just about the healing journey. And I think a lot of young people are really interested in psychedelics, but to me I see a lot of beauty with older demographics. You see the grooves of thought so strong in older people, and a lot of them are midlife crisis is a thing. You're in a rut, you did the same thing for 25 years, you're not happy, you're coming out of a marriage, whatever it is. And being able to break up systematized beliefs and open this new reality is so fundamentally important. And I think the beauty is not just for young people and their exploration, but older people, not just for people who want to heal from depression, but for people who want to recognize their power. And I think you probably have many stories in this because a lot of your clientele are very successful people.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I think there's a lot of people, as I did many years ago now, but many people in the corporate and professional world increasingly, that they get to a place where what has been working no longer does. So they no longer gain joy from their career. And so they start looking around, not knowing where to look, actually. And so that begins the search for the real self, which is a very exciting period for anyone. And obviously, there's many tools and modalities and methods to get there, but certainly psychedelics is an increasingly popular one. And so, yeah, we do receive quite a few guests that have reached that place. And, sometimes they're aware of childhood trauma that has just been sitting there but unprocessed. Sometimes they're not, but you can tell that it is there. The brain is so good at compartmentalizing some of these things away from consciousness. And so, these medicines are very powerful in helping us reconnect to and access so that we can kind of surface, process, and release the energies that are associated with past traumas. So a lot of people are coming, with a degree of awareness of the requirement to go down there and release stuff related to childhood traumas and bullying and all of those sorts of things. Other people are more looking at it from a productivity perspective or from a growth perspective in terms of, I just want to feel better. I want to be better. I want to do more. I want to feel more connected to life. And that's really beautiful. And then last, we get a lot of people who they're not feeling connected to spirit, or they want to deepen their connection to spirit. And of course, these can be very powerful experiences for that. And I think, the key, as you mentioned before, really comes back to intentionality. The more that we prepare for these experiences and really go deep with ourselves and, potentially with the help of a coach or a therapist to help us set the right intentions and really work with that intention, begin to learn some of the tools for becoming more aware of our thought patterns, our limiting beliefs, and how to process emotions. The emotions are stuck in the body generally. And so those things, when we feel frustrated, when we feel overwhelmed, when we feel stuck, those are all just emotions that we don't know how to deal with. And so most of us have coping mechanisms, whether it's food or sex or alcohol or any other the number modern vices. There's some way to escape the negative feeling. And in the modern world where people are doing, we've never been more abundant on a collective level, even if it's not always felt. There's many ways to escape the self. And so teaching people these tools to manage their minds, manage their emotions, self-parenting, as it's often described, is so fundamental, because that just, when you combine those tools with these powerful transformative experiences, that's when the magic, I think, really happens, because it sets people up for success, not just during the retreat, but in life afterwards, to continue to work with these tools, because the mind always wants to grab onto things and see things that are negative. And so being able to bring the mind in particular back into alignment is so important.
Yeah, it's like we have different bodies. We have the emotional, the physical, and the mental. And when these three bodies are aligned, then the spiritual is. So it's almost like harmonizing these frequencies. And when you talked about intention, I couldn't help but think that, yeah, everything in life is a relationship. So the more you are respecting the substance you are using with intention, with a proper setting, and not just, you know, using DMT at a house party or something like this, it responds to the way you use it. And that's where intention comes in, is how much can I respect myself in this process, but simultaneously also respecting this medicine. And it's like a circle, it feeds back. And another thing you brought up was this state of heightened awareness. And so much of the culture, it's like Brave New World, it's like numbing through pleasure, and we feel this all the time, but we see that pleasure isn't joy. It's a completely different feeling. Me eating a chocolate bar is a completely different feeling than the connection I have when I can transcend the body-mind complex. And it feels like, yeah, and then we're stuck on these hedonic loops of the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, because the thing we are taking isn't fulfilling us.
Right.
And I used to work behind closed doors for 2 billionaires. And a lot of my friends are also in this league of taking everything from the material world and seeing that it's never enough. And this is where the connection to spirit comes in, because we all know this. I feel like we pretend we don't, that we know money can't buy happiness. But the thing with money is we're so celebrated for the more we can take, the more we can grow, the more we can have. And there's such a focus on having rather than being.
Yeah.
And this state of self-knowledge and self-exploration, bringing the highest of virtues, bringing the sense of innate beauty, innate wisdom, and nothing in the material world being able to touch it. And then you're so in your power, because it feels like so many things can happen to you, and you have this state of knowing that what's most important can never be taken away from you. And it's also interesting bringing this back to the personal, to my own journey of when I was younger and I was deeply unconscious and feeling all the time like problems are just happening to me. Why are all these mistakes happening? Why is life so hard? And life isn't hard. It's just always giving you lessons. The lesson will keep returning until you've learned it. And then after I started working with psychedelics, also meditation, yoga, many different things, there's this feeling always of just life being easy. Like the problems aren't coming because you are specifically working on yourself. So the problems don't need to be thrown in your face. You don't need to be punched in the face by life when you are consciously working on yourself. And the thing is, we've been so numbed to our interior landscapes, so in these hedonic treadmills, these processes of being so external. And to me, the beauty is when the interior landscape and the exterior can be in symbiosis. And then you actually become life, and there you feel that there's not separation. And also, I think a lot of psychedelics, what they help with is the way you relate, leaving fear and tapping into love, because it's actually the same thing. And it's what I've noticed in my relationships to friends and family, or having a partner and feeling like, wow, I love you so much, I don't want to lose you. And then the clinging happens, and being in the fear state, you end up, fear and desire manifest on very similar levels. You will get what you fear in the same way you get what you desire. And so learning how to tap into the heart, the energy of the heart, has been a huge fundamental for me with the psychedelic journey. What you felt, whether it's with ayahuasca or psilocybin, with this connection to the heart space, increasing empathy, relational values.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be gained there. I think some of the most interesting work is being done by the Heart Math Institute. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but they've done some really interesting work that shows basically that we can emit light from our heart. And also, I think some of the work of, what's his name? I think Gregory Braden. He's done some great work and shows that the heart center has basically more neurons than the brain. And so there's a shift, as you were alluding to. Most of us in our lives, we identify with our minds. And then through spiritual work, spiritual development, at one point, the heart opens up. And that's a big shift in the origin of the self. And, you often have to do this more consciously, but the core of the self actually can move down and to be felt to originate from the heart. And for many people, that's when they have a much deeper sense of intuition. What would have taken a lot of mind thinking in order to think about, okay, what's this option? What's that option? Which one's the best? Why is it the best? All of these things that the mind agonizes over for weeks or months or even years sometimes, the heart just intuitively knows. And so when we're able to tap into that, it's really a superpower, and it can change life so significantly. And so I think, the other piece that, of course, you're talking about there is to do with fear versus love. The mind is so good at living in the gap, what I call the gap, which is fundamentally that things will be okay when, right? And so the mind naturally wants to think that, okay, once I finish this project, or once I meet the right person, or once I buy the house of my dreams, or whatever it is, it has this narrative that's endless that things will be okay when. And then you get to the end of the life and you're thinking, oh, things will be okay when. You go, oh, I've just lived an entire life in a state of things will be okay when. And that's tragic. That's a life of regrets on a fundamental level. And so I think when the heart doesn't really have access to the past or the future, it lives in the now, and it lives from a state of love and from a state of having and being, and much more joy, love, and peace. Whereas the mind is always trying to make distinctions that the heart doesn't make. Now, of course, these are two tools that when they're combined, then they're even more powerful, each of them.
Yeah. And I think especially when we get too cerebral and there's not space given to the heart, in some way we're a lot easier to control, because you can rationalize almost anything in life. You can make anything look like a key decision but how you said, at certain points with the heart, there's not even a decision to be made. And this is the beauty of intuition, because actually, so the mind is the filter of everything. And in reality, we can't take in all information consciously, because our brains would just explode. It's too much information. So the whole storehouse comes from the subconscious, which actually also lives within the body. And when we have our intuition, it's not just like, oh, I just feel it in my heart and it comes from my gut too. It's like everything that you've experienced is, on a scientific level, they will call it thin splicing. All the memories, everything that has happened to you is being condensed so quickly. If you try to rationalize it, you can rationalize your way out of it as well. And so this state of listening, and the mind is quite loud and the heart space is more subtle. The Chinese have a word for it called the sin, like the heart mind. And when both of these are in a dialogue, how beautiful and how important that really is. And also with the information age we live in, we're just programmed, of course, to be more in our minds. And it's not like the way we used to be, with needing to be fit and in our bodies and fighting to survive. The best weapon is the intellect.
Yeah.
And so it's something that's sharpened and used, and in a way it's beautiful and it's helpful and it's necessary. But living only in this space will always cause agony. And when I think about the best experiences I've had in my life, mostly like just the most blissful or divine, has always been in the state of going so completely out of my mind and going into universal consciousness, or even actually just being so in my body. It's not always about leaving the body. It's actually feeling like the beauty of form. Yeah, and I think it's something that we forget. There's been multiple trips I've had, especially with psilocybin, of recognizing actually that I have a body. And I think a lot of it is because it comes from psilocybin is this like earthly matter. You feel this like density, like Bufo, 5-MeO-DMT is more divine, heavenly. This is like really feeling I am part of the earth. And in a way, when you feel you're part of something, there's a responsibility there. I was thinking about how when we go into these altered states of consciousness, how naturally empathy increases, because if I am you and you are me, I know in some way that if I walked the same path you did and had the same life you did, we would end up in the same place. And then it also goes into like concepts of free will and is there free will and all these things. But yeah, how do you feel that plant medicine and psychedelics have helped you in the process of forgiveness?
Yeah, I think forgiveness is such a portal. I think one of the things that as we work with ourselves and with psychedelics more, we come to recognize that so many things can be a portal. Whether it's love or whether it's our fears, whether it's, staring at a beautiful flower for hours on end. But I think forgiveness is such a powerful one. To forgive ourselves first and foremost, and to really work with that, because there's a lot of depth there. And certainly it can become quite an emotional process. I've had, without psychedelics, I've had probably my most powerful experience was not with any medicine, just working on forgiveness. Very, very powerful experience. The most powerful experience I've ever had. And it was just repeating a forgiveness mantra. And so it's a very powerful force. And I think if you think about our individual as well as our collective evolution, what needs to happen is at a fundamental level forgiveness. So we need to forgive ourselves for any past misdeeds that we've done, real and perceived. And equally, we need to forgive all others for any transgressions of the past, real and perceived. And with that, we, on a kind of quantum level or on an energetic level, what we are doing with forgiveness is we're actually removing negative energetic lines between ourselves and others. So you can think of it as like just really doing a proper house cleanup with respect to your emotional state. And what people are often surprised about with respect to forgiveness is that once we truly forgive another, the tension, the animosity, the negativity that might have been there in that relationship dissipates almost immediately. And people are like, wait, how did the other person, because I've only worked on this myself, how did they, because they've changed just by virtue of me working on myself. And I've had so many examples where people are just like, wow, our relationship has totally changed. And they think that often people think that there's something that shifted in the other. It's not the case. Well, I mean, it's been enabled through the work that they've done on themselves. And so it's fascinating and really rewarding when people use this powerful force and come to recognize that the nature of negativity that they have in their lives is predominantly a function of themselves and that they have a power over it. And it's both, humbling in a sense that you have responsibility for the reality that you've created for yourself, and equally empowering because you also have it within you to be able to correct the energetic structures and relationships that you have in your life so that you can move more and more into your power and more into your freedom, your sovereignty, your love, any other language that we might use.
Yeah. And what came up for me while you were speaking is what stops us from forgiveness much of the time is this feeling of righteousness, which is someone else has wronged us and I was right and I'm hurting. And in a lot of cases, like serious cases, sexual abuse, having your father murdered, like very deep things that are difficult to resolve. You can't be a victim and a master at the same time. And feeling forgiveness for someone, and real forgiveness, not just on the level like I know that they were just doing what they knew how to do and I forgive, but I don't really forgive. Is so different than this fully feeling in this process of what you said, also release, letting it go, letting the thought construct around who they are go. Because what we're creating all the time with each other is self-fulfilling prophecies where I'm projecting onto you a villain and you kind of become more of a villain in my eyes or more of an oppressor. And how you said these relationship dynamics change fundamentally when our beliefs around them need to change first. Before the people's action changes, actually the feeling we have about them needs to change first to open up this spaciousness that allows them to behave differently. And it's a really difficult but necessary process, and so necessary. The personal is political. When we can fix what we feel towards our mothers, towards even strangers we feel have wronged us, friends, it ripples outwards. And I think what I would love to see in politics is the state of taking accountability for oneself, and instead of this blame game constantly admitting to faults openly and having this honesty and being able to feel like what you're building afterwards is real. And I think what we see, especially in places like the United States, is a lot of putting things under the rug. And then there's huge colossal movements like Black Lives Matter and all these things. And there's a lot of anger and polarization and hostility because as things were occurring, government couldn't come out and say, I was wrong. Or even presidents getting into whatever fix it is. For example, like Clinton being able to just say, like, I cheated on my wife and it felt right in the moment, but overall it was wrong. And instead what we see always is blaming and this thing of not being able to be honest with ourselves first. And as you said, this process of forgiveness starts with the self because we are always our harshest critics. We see what people project on the outside. We don't know what they're really going through. And so it's easier to judge ourselves when we know the content of our entire lives. And how this process of being gentle with oneself is also so nourishing and so important to get to the state of fully loving yourself. There has to be this process of forgiveness. And psychedelics are just so powerful to get us to this state of the interconnection we all have. And knowing that the work I do on myself affects you and affects actually everything.
Absolutely. And that's, one of the things that I think is so powerful in relation to this work is what you're alluding to, which is the ripple effect, which is, I have more and more friends now, and we see more and more clients that not only have they been able to really deeply and meaningfully help themselves, but by virtue of having released some of the negativity and past traumas, they're also able to be in a position where they're able to help others, right? Others within their families and their friends group, and get them on their own journeys of healing and self-discovery. And I think that's so beautiful. I wanted to tie together, I think, as you were saying, the piece around victim. I loved what you said, you can only be a master or a victim. One of the quotes that came to mind was from Rumi. There's a quote that kind of relates to non-duality, which he says, out beyond
ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a garden, I'll meet you there.
That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yes.
And so there's a couple of things in that, which is I really like, which is dropping all judgment, right? Because each and every one of us is in their own place. And some people that we meet will be receptive to bigger ideas, to healing, to moving into a more and more authentic and honest and peaceful and loving reflection of themselves. Other people and open to spirituality, and other people will not be. And we will find that we can never play an overactive role in encouraging people to do this work. Either they feel drawn to it or they don't, and that's okay. And so what I think Rumi is pointing to is that we have to, the opportunity for each of us is to move into this space, this garden that is beyond judgment. There is no right and wrong. It's just experience that is bouncing off itself in order to learn more lessons and further its own understanding of itself. And there's, that's the human form. It's perfectly imperfect. And to meet in the field, I will meet you there, is this kind of quite transcendent statement, right? Which is, okay, you might want to get into a conversation about she did this and he did that and they shouldn't have done that and this and that and the other and lots of drama and all of that. And he's saying, look, I'm in the garden. I'll meet you there if you want to meet me there. If you don't, that's okay, which I really love.
Yeah, and it also alludes to what you were speaking about. You can only meet someone as deeply as they've met themselves. And it is work. It's not, going into many of these journeys isn't just pleasantries. It's like, of course, there's the bliss once release has come, once the dealing with the internal narration has been there. There is a lot of pain. And most people meet the pain when they are forced into it, when, life gives it to them. But this thing of consciously and with loving awareness, meeting the wounds, meeting the pain, is difficult. And speaking to someone who isn't on the same frequency as you, the message won't deliver.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time when we feel we're in a really good place, we just actually naturally create an environment where people who want to be in that space will just naturally be attracted to us. But if there's this savior complex, and I felt it still with my own family, where because I've been traveling the world for years, and when I do visit back home, there's this feeling of, how are you all still living like this? Like, there's so much possibility. And I've been a lot of the time given this mindset that in order to survive, you need to suffer a lot, and you need to suffer every day. And to make your own dreams come true, first you need to start working on somebody else's dreams, which all of these mental models don't make sense to me. And there's always this friction in the beginning, I feel, when I'm trying to force someone, because you love them. Yeah, of course I love my family, like forcing them up to come up for air and like, be here with me. And they're like, I'm miserable. Leave me where I am. And that's okay too. Yeah. And that's a process. Mm-hmm. And it really is. Joseph Campbell talks about it, but it's like the hero's journey. And when there's the calling, a lot of the time people won't open the door, but to be there and to know when to open the door and when to allow is so important.
Yeah, and I think it also relates back to intuition, right? When we're able to tap into a real intuitive and empathetic sense of another, then we can, spend the time and energy to really understand what's going on there and to begin to make just the most minor of adjustments that they're receptive to. And those, these things tend to build momentum on their own. It's just a matter of trying to appeal to the way in which they already see things rather than the way in which we might like them to see things to some degree.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, what psychedelics and plant medicine do, especially for me, it was when I was younger in the beginning trips, was it completely disrupts your whole model of reality. And for most people, that is a form of death, when everything you thought was real isn't. And actually, for me, a lot of the processing was how people who had the best intentions for me had no idea what they were talking about. And all the lies that we've been sold continuously, all the social myths, all the indoctrination, and to break all of it is really a form of death. And so when we're trying to be with someone who's coming out of that space, it's so necessary to have this empathy to see, like, in a way they're dying. They're about to be hopefully reborn, but because it's difficult.
It is. It's the moment that the ego death is the moment that the fear goes for the first time, right? It really, you finally let go of the fear, the ego and the fear structure. And that's such a powerful moment. Very difficult to reach, but such a powerful moment. I think coming back to earlier conversation, 5-MeO-DMT is a very powerful medicine for this reason. Again, for those who are ready, it can facilitate that process, that experience, I think much more quickly than some of the other medicines that are out there. But coming through that rebirthing process and coming back into a new understanding of reality and knowing for sure that we are infinite beings changes the value that we place on life itself. It's kind of ironic. It's a lot of these things in my experience reduced to paradox. It's paradoxical in that the moment that we realize that we are infinite beings, we begin to place a lot more value on the finite human embodied experience, because a lot of people don't feel connected with their sense of purpose and their sense of joy in daily life. And you're like, wow, I am infinite, but I don't know how long I'm going to be here in this body and in this life. And now don't I just want to make the most out of every minute that is available here?
Another thing that came up for me was this sense of how important awe is. How doing something like psilocybin and seeing a tree, but then seeing that the tree is a similar form of life to you and seeing its vibrations and luminescence, and even just looking at your own hand and seeing like how the body is so miraculous, how even the Big Bang, that we came from nothing into everything.
Yeah.
how everyday living is so beautiful. And another thing is also this awe brings a hypersensitivity. So all the things that we took for granted or as banal and mediocre and not so interesting become interesting because our state of presence and awe has increased. And then life, exactly as you said, becomes more valuable. And on a further note, I felt this in myself where I don't even think about the meaning or purpose of life anymore when I am so deeply involved in it. I don't have these existential dilemmas when I'm fully in reverence of each moment.
Yeah. And again, it comes back to that, I got to find my purpose. I got to, it's a future orientation that in a sense disconnects you from the present moment, which is always not the truth. And it's funny, just as you were alluding to, it's like getting back to the magic. We all know the quantum physics tells us that density is pure illusion, but most of us still walk through life with this kind of experience of density and the material. And we need to do this and that for things to be correct. And just to engage with that on a different level, which is that it's all magic unfolding as it should. And I'm just here to experience the best version of that is possible for me. And to remain gratitude, to keep that gratitude in your heart for knowing that the best things are coming to you. And the way that this all works, as far as I can tell, is that if you're in, I need this in the outside world in order for me to be whole in the inside world, it will never come. But if the converse is true, in that you keep gratitude for the knowing that all the best things are coming, then the universe is sending that to you immediately. Because as you said before, it's all vibratory in nature. It's all energy and vibration. And so the moment that we are putting out a frequency and a vibration which is grateful and happy and abundant and just full of belief and faith, then the universe is able to respond to that. But it's not just a thought in the mind. There's a really beautiful exercise that I love, which is that what we want to do is, yes, create the ideal future or the ideal reality for ourselves in imagination, and then really embody the emotional experience of that. It's not just a thought in the mind. And then we want to surrender to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And that's something that's a combination of steps. It took me a while to work with it. But once we get to that place of not only imagining that ideal state of being in terms of the 3D experience, for example, but then also embodying the emotions, the gratitude, the laughter, the community, just the love for other people and, all the good things in life, and then surrendering that. So just knowing that that's coming to you and that it's coming in the right way at the right time, and that you don't need to get too involved in the egoic actions that will relate to it. The right things will present themselves at the right time.
And it really is a form of trust in a way. It's a trust of the self and then a trust of life as a whole. And I really love this phrase, wu wei, this process of actually non-doing. And it's not like you're sitting there and you're just complacent and not doing anything, but it's the not forcing life. And so much of suffering is from aspects of control and thinking that we can manipulate our surroundings so that we can then feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about this quite often, is that it's exactly as you said, no, the actual feeling has to come first. I remember my first job ever I was like 13 or 14 years old, and I worked in a tutoring center. And there would be long periods of time where I would just be sitting there, and there was a banner on the wall that said, to be a success, you have to believe you're a success. And the belief, the thought, the feeling has to come first.
Yeah.
And this is what I see with a lot of people I know who have reached success in multiple realms. So on a health realm, financially, and joy. What I've seen is even when life was giving them the opposite, when they were dead broke, when they were sleeping on their friend's floor, there was this trust in themselves that right now life isn't ideally how I think it should be, but I know that when I'm aligned to what I feel I should be doing, it will happen. And I don't know when it will happen, but it's also this thing of, instead of trying to solve the mystery, of embracing it.
Yeah.
And this is also what I so love about the plant medicine and psychedelic journey, is this total love of the mystery, and knowing that it's not something that I need to break apart and and dissect, but it's something to experience. Yeah, because most of life we cannot understand cognitively.
Totally.
And it's interesting and fascinating to try to,
Yeah.
but to just actually be in humility and be like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is so beautiful, because then the aspects of needing to control and also fear is almost pretty much eliminated when there is this fundamental trust in life.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, a lot of people with psychedelics, they develop a deeper understanding of the rhythms of creation, of, these incredible mystical experiences, universal love, and the interconnectivity of all things, and God consciousness, and all of these, beautiful mystical experiences. And so many people get caught in the desire to try to understand more and more and more and more. There's on one level, there's beauty in that. But on the other level, I think it does ultimately lead to what you just described, which is we have to surrender to the mystery and recognize that we will never understand the infinite, because it truly is. And no number of psychedelic journeys is going to allow you to bring back down and into the little mind and be able to articulate or cognize about reality. It's just infinitely more complex than that.
Yes, I would agree. Yeah. And before we close, I just want to thank you, because I'm just happy to know you. Yeah, I'm just happy to know you, and I feel the work you're doing is so important, and it really is a reflection of you and your journey. And I feel like every conversation we have, I have small revelations, and I really sense the beauty of life when I'm with you. And so I'm just so happy to know you, to have worked for you, to be on this island with you. And so I want to thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Roxy. It's it's a real pleasure to have you as a friend and to deepen the friendship together.
Yes.
Much love.